because of the details of the attempted insurrection at the Capitol and the complicity of many congressional Republicans, a lot of our attention has been focused on the violence, rightly so. But here's the thing that I want to remind everyone of. If the mob had never showed up, if there had been no event on January 6th, no violence whatsoever, what happened inside Congress on January 6th was an unprecedented bit of anti-democratic action by American politicians. 147 congressional Republicans, the majority of the caucus, voted against seating Biden's electors. They voted to overturn the election functionally. The precedent they set was this, that Americans can have a presidential election, one that goes on longer than almost anywhere else in the Western world, with billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of people voting. And then, after all that's happened, Congress will decide whether they accept what the American people have decided. Maybe they just override it. Maybe they just think, you know what? You guys chose wrong. We're going to choose the other guy. And if any of you thought that was a one-time thing, think again. Earlier this week, an Arizona Republican state representative introduced a bill that would give the Arizona legislature the authority to override the Secretary of State's certification of its electoral votes. Get this, they do not even need a reason, okay? If this were to become a state law, the people of Arizona, again, they could vote for whoever they want to be president, but they don't get to choose. The legislator, they'll come in and decide who gets the electoral votes. This is not an isolated situation. We've already seen similar movements, not quite as frankly anti-democratic as this, but Republicans looking to game the system in other states. In Wisconsin, Republicans introduced a bill to reallocate the state's electoral votes by congressional district. That's something that 2 states already do. And if they'd done that, that would have made Donald Trump the winner of the majority of Wisconsin's electoral votes if it had been in place in the last election. The Guardian reports Republicans across the country are considering more than 100 bills to restrict voting rights because the lesson they learned after losing the presidential election and also the Senate is not to broaden their appeal or to shun Donald Trump and the things he stood for or to turn out the vote. The lesson they have learned is that if lots of people vote and they choose your opponent, you should just figure out how to stop people from voting. And if that fails, just come up with a way to veto their votes altogether. I want to bring in Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona. Your state is at the center, I think, right now of a lot of things happening in politics in America. This bill, how seriously should we take it?
That's right. Well, I think we do have to take it seriously. Look, Arizona was one of the only states that passed a birther initiative asking the president for his birth certificate back in 2011. So these types of actions should not be surprising at all. The Republican Party in Arizona is totally imploding. They have not been able to win many races, especially statewide races, and they know the future is looking very grim. So instead of trying to win the argument of the future, they're trying to just stop the elections of the future. And this is one of those actions.
You said this in a tweet. You said referendums are expensive, but I will raise the money to kill this democracy-killing bill. Follow this bill. If it passes, we will have 90 days after it is signed the law to collect the necessary signatures to get it on the ballot and then defeat it. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, my Lord, does this have a chance in that legislature? What is your read on that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, if you look at the history of Arizona and the state legislature, Debbie Lesko and Andy Biggs, 2 of the people that led the attempts to overthrow the election, came from that legislature. And so you cannot trust anything in Arizona when the legislature is in town. We used to have a joke that when the legislature is in town, your horse, your money, and now your right to vote is in trouble.
You just mentioned Debbie Lesko, Andy Biggs, also Paul Gosar, who tweeted about, don't make me come over there somewhat menacingly to Joe Biden. Those are all folks that are in your state congressional caucus. What do you think about the way they voted? What do you think about the aftermath of the way they voted to, and if I'm not mistaken, specifically on not seating Arizona's state electors?
Well, it's embarrassing. They know that this state has been trending blue. They know that Donald Trump was a very toxic candidate in Arizona. It nearly cost them the state house and a bunch of other seats. But instead of actually dealing with the reality that they need to have a more appealing message and a more appealing messenger, they're trying to change the rules. Let's be clear. In Arizona, ever since we have been, I think since 1960s, we've been considered a red state. There was never any attempt to overturn elections. There was never any attempt to take away power of certification from the Secretary of State. It only happened when two things occurred. Number one, when Latinos started voting at higher percentages than they have in the past, they started taking more political power. Number two, Democrats started winning. It's not a coincidence. It's a game they've been playing for a long time. And now they are trying to do it in earnest because they know they're going to, again, lose the future.
What do you think the proper course of action is for Congress as regards the members that voted not to seat the electors? You know, at one level, it was just a vote in the context of a vote they were allowed to take. You know, they didn't do anything illegal in voting that way. They're colleagues of yours. People vote different ways on different motions at different times. At the other level, what they were voting for is fundamentally kind of a threat to American democracy as we understand it. And so what is the correct, appropriate reaction to that from the Democratic majority in Congress or Congress more broadly?
Well, I think we certainly have to make examples of some of these members of Congress. You know, it's hard to hold a whole 130 other members responsible because we do still have to have a functioning Congress, but we need to have a couple things. Number one, we need to admit that this election was a free and fair election, and that Donald Trump lost in a free and fair election. That's the first thing we need to hear. And number two, we need to hear at least some level of contrition that you even attempted to do this. At those two things, I think is very important for some of our friends to come back into the fold. But then some of these ringleaders, some of these conspiracy theorists, some of these outright racists like Mo Brooks from Alabama, we really should censor them and, if possible, remove them from Congress.